Hi, everybody. My name is Sarah Ryan, and I am the Chief Marketing Officer at Rays of Gratitude. And today we have a special guest, Mr. Brad Nahill. He is the co-founder of the Sea Turtles organization and has been in conservation for many years. So we are very excited to have you. Thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure. I'm excited to be here today. Yeah, thank you for the invitation.
Of course. I want to start with you telling us a little bit about your background and how you got into the field of conservation.
Sure. Yeah. I've been running Sea Turtles now for 16 years. So we started in 2008. Prior to that, I really got my start in the conservation field. After college, I wanted to do something that was related to the environment and wildlife. But when I graduated, I had a degree in environmental economics. And I didn't really have much, practical experience. I didn't know what it actually looked like in reality. And so I decided to save up some money and go and volunteer. And I wanted to spend some time in Latin America, learn Spanish, see the area. And so I went online and I started searching for volunteer projects in Latin America. And this is pre-Google. And almost everything that I found were sea turtle projects in Costa Rica. So I was like, okay, I guess I'm working with sea turtles in Costa Rica. There weren't a lot of other opportunities that someone without a scientific background could go and work hands-on with these animals, and especially in places where it was relatively affordable, because most places, charge you for room and board, things like that. Um, I didn't have a lifelong, love for sea turtles or anything like that. I had no experience with them at all. Um, but yeah, the sea turtle community kind of figured out, I think, earlier than a lot of other conservation projects that people would pay to go and participate. And it was a way to bring in income and to bring in volunteer support. So I went and I did that. I worked for 6 weeks on a leatherback project on the Pacific coast of Costa Rica, which I really enjoyed. And then I spent a couple of months also working on an organic farm on the Caribbean coast of Costa Rica. After that, I came back. I got an internship in DC with an advocacy group, and I enjoyed it, but I didn't enjoy DC very much. Um, and I loved Costa Rica so much that I decided I need to go back. And so I went back again, and that's where I met my ex-wife, who was a biologist on a turtle project. So yeah, we met and we traveled around a bit. We worked on a few different beaches, and eventually we got offered a job running a new project, a leatherback project on the Caribbean coast. And so we did that for a season. And then after that, we moved back to the States. And yeah, my career has kind of moved on from there.
I love that. I love that. I also have a background in organic farming, so that's really interesting that you have that experience as well. I want to hear a little bit more about how Sea Turtles came about and the organization, how you guys founded it and what it stands for.
Sure. So the idea for the project, originally a project, came from Dr. Wallace J. Nichols, who's a leader in the sea turtle conservation field. He was hired by Ocean Conservancy, where I was working as a grant writer at the time, to replace an absolute legend, a woman named Mary Dell Donnelly, who's helped save more sea turtles than just about anyone that I've ever met. It was a real mentor to me. But she moved on, and the organization hired Jay, and I knew him a bit from some of the meetings and conferences before. And the first idea that he came with when he came to the organization was, why don't we start a program that supports communities that want to develop what we call conservation tourism. So tourism that benefits conservation efforts in different places. He spent a lot of his career working in Mexico, particularly in Baja, and there were a lot of fishermen there that were catching turtles in their fishing nets, but who had wanted to move into tourism, but didn't know how to go about finding a traveler. And so asked Jay for help. And then combined with my experience working in Costa Rica, I had spent some time working with some ecotourism operators. It was a perfect fit. So we decided to start Sea Turtles it was originally an ocean conservancy program that had the aim of supporting conservation through travel.
Mhm.
And so that was what we focused on for the first couple of years, was building up relationships in the tourism industry, marketing trips to um, places where people could go, and then finding local partners who could use that kind of help. We needed volunteer help, whose communities could use having some more travelers to benefit community development efforts and things like that.
Nice. I know you guys have many, many projects that you guys do through Sea Turtles. I do want to hear about the Seashell app and your Billion Baby Turtles project.
Okay. Yeah. So, yeah, we have a number of different projects now. So, yeah, we started with tourism. After a few years, we came to the realization that, like, yeah, we can have an impact with tourism, but, it's very niche. And we wanted to be able to benefit these organizations that we were working with in a deeper way. So that's when we launched Billion Baby Turtles, which was in 2013. And so the idea for that was how much does it cost to save a hatchling? And we didn't know, so we went out to a bunch of our partners and we said, all right, take your budget and divide it by your average number of hatchlings, give us a number. And so we went to a bunch of different organizations. And initially we were like, can we save a hatchling with $1? Like, that would be great. But the average that it came out to with the first few projects was 5 hatchlings per $1. So that's a pretty compelling message. And so we started raising funds through individual donors, through our trips, through corporate sponsors, students, things like that, to then provide funding for these important turtle nesting beaches, initially around Latin America. Now we work with, between 40 and 50 nesting beaches all around the world. We work with several in Asia, several in Africa, all focused in developing countries where the threats to the turtles are most immediate, where people are eating the eggs or eating the turtles themselves. And what we noticed is, as we brought on more partners, and we brought on a couple of bigger partners who had a very low cost per hatchling saved, that it actually went up to 10 hatchlings for every dollar saved. And so that has been our biggest and most successful program. This past year, we passed 10 million baby turtles saved, which we're
Wow.
really excited about. Yeah, it took us 4 years to get to 1 million. And then last year we saved 4 million alone. So the rate of um, saving them is going up quickly.
Yeah.
We like to joke that we're only 990 million away from our ultimate goal. But we're finding more support every year. And we're also seeing that as a number of turtle nesting beaches are recovering, because there is some really good news. In the environmental world, there's a lot of bad news, but in the sea turtle world, there's some really good news of um, recovering populations. And so we're seeing costs go down. So we're saving more hatchlings per dollar as these beaches start to recover. So the more they recover, the more hatchlings we can save. So yeah, that's been a really fun program and a really popular one, especially, we know that it's sponsors and individuals love it because it's very concrete. They know if they're donating $10, they can save, 100 or more hatchlings.
I love that. That's so impressive. And, it's only getting bigger. You'll get, I'm sure a billion will come quicker than you expect.
Hopefully in my lifetime. Billion's a big number, but yeah, we're working on it. We're really excited about the progress.
Yeah. So Rays of Gratitude, we are partnered with the Hawksbill Project out of England. So we are very passionate about hawksbill turtles. We do a lot of our conservation efforts focusing on hawksbill turtles. So I want to hear about the Seashell app and how it is helping hawksbill turtle populations.
Yeah, and yeah, thank you for your support of the Hawksbill project.
Yeah.
We appreciate that. You guys are doing some pretty creative fundraising and stuff, and yeah, the Hawksbills need all the help they can. So yeah, we appreciate you doing that work.
Yeah.
we're big fans of hawksbills too. They're really amazing turtles, really important turtles. They're really important for the health of coral reefs because they eat a lot of sea sponges that compete with coral for space. But they're the animal that has been most affected by the trade in shells. If you've heard of tortoiseshell, you may have a tortoiseshell cat, or you know the pattern and the animal have become kind of intertwined. It's actually not from a tortoise, it's from a sea turtle, from the hawksbill turtle. And their shells are that particular pattern of brown and gold and yellow that has become so ubiquitous as a pattern. Um, it's a really beautiful shell, but that beauty has really been a major challenge for these animals because that shell is so pliable. We like to say it was plastic before plastic was invented because it can really be worked into different shapes and things, and has been used for thousands of years to make different products. And so it has long been exploited for its shell. And from the 1850s to the 1990s, when the international trade was finally, the legal international trade was finally ended for good, millions and millions of turtles were exported primarily to Japan, which has a big industry. They call it Beko. And so that has resulted in the hawksbill turtle becoming critically endangered, one of the two sea turtles that are considered critically endangered. And I actually have uh, an example here. This tortoiseshell necklace I actually found in the bathroom of a friend of mine here in Portland, Oregon, where I live. She had some jewelry hanging from it, and I looked at it and I said, "Oh my gosh, that's real, actual hawksbill." And I brought it out and I said, "Do you know what this is?" And she said, "Yeah, it's caré." She was from Costa Rica. And I said, "Yeah, caré." She said, "Yeah, caré. That's what that pattern is." I was like, "Caré is Spanish for hawksbill."
Mm.
Like, oh my God, she had no idea. She bought it in Cuba. If you're an average person and you see this sitting on a shelf, are you going to be like, oh yeah, that's definitely sea turtle, right?
Yeah.
It looks like plastic or other some sort of natural material. So this trade is still happening pretty frequently, although illegally in most places. Japan still has a legal industry, but you have to be Japanese to purchase it. You can't take it out of the country, but you can still find these products in a lot of places. A lot of places in Latin America. Nicaragua is a huge spot for it. You can still find it in Costa Rica, Colombia, as well as Asia, particularly in Indonesia. China, it's still sold a fair amount. So there's, a handful of countries where these products can still be found, and they're preventing the recovery of these animals. So from millions of hawksbills around the world, our best estimates today are, 15 to maybe 25,000 adult female hawksbills. So it's been a dramatic decline. And so, because of that ongoing issue, we started a program a few years ago called To Rare to Wear, where we're using our connections to the tourism industry to educate travelers about these products and how to recognize them. So we came up with a guide that says, all right, if you look for like these certain characteristics of the product to be able to tell if it's either hawksbill or maybe it's plastic, or it could be coconut shell or horn or bone or seashell, things like that. But we realized that one of the biggest impediments to stopping this trade and reducing the demand for it is really giving people an easy tool to recognize these products. And so we got together with a data scientist and an app developer to create Seashell, which you mentioned. So Seashell is an app that uses machine learning, basically a form of AI, to determine if a product that you're looking at is real hawksbill turtle or not. So it's an app that you can download it on your phone, and you can get it on either app in either Google or Apple. Just look for Seashell, SEE shell. And so you can download this app, and it gives you some instructions on how to take the photo. But if you're in a place where you're not sure, you can snap a photo of it and it'll compare it to this database of thousands of photos that we put together and tell you with a pretty high degree of accuracy, yes, it's real, no, it's not, or we're not exactly sure. And then we get that data on the back end to be able to say, all right, this is a spot where there is some major trade happening. And so it's a really simple tool. And so we've been doing trainings of government enforcement officials. If you're a customs officer in a place, you're looking for potentially hundreds, if not thousands, of types of animals, let alone drugs and illegal other things. We don't expect everybody to be an expert on telling what's real and what's not real sea turtle. So we've been training those folks, and it's available to the general public as well. And it's something that we're very excited about and think really has a lot of potential to impact this ongoing trade.
Yes, I love that. Making it accessible for people and easy for people to be able to identify is so important, and using AI for a good purpose is always a good thing. So, I love that. I appreciate you sharing about that. I do want to touch on your two books. You co-authored a worldwide travel guide to sea turtles, and you wrote Sea Turtle Research and Conservation Lessons from Working in the Field. So I want to hear a little bit about your experience as an author and what you would say is the most important lesson you've learned from working in the field of conservation.
Sure. Yeah, and that's a great question. Yeah, for the field guide, that was a lot of fun to work on and to use our expertise and our network of partners around the world to be able to promote them. I'll say that Melissa Gaskill really was the driving force behind that book, and we just kind of lent our expertise and added, certain aspects in terms of like guidelines for turtle watching and recommendations for really good places to go, and some info about the animals themselves. But Melissa really did the heavy lifting on that book. From Lessons from the Field, I edited it and I wrote a few chapters, and then I tapped into our network of friends and partners in the field, and I basically put a call out there saying, hey, in your area, what is it like to work in your field, and what lessons have you learned? And if you were going to advise like a young conservationist, what would you tell them? And so I wanted to try to bring in as many different perspectives as possible from as many different aspects of working with these animals. So it includes working on the beach, working in the water, studying climate. I wrote a chapter on fundraising for these animals and ecotourism. My friend Mary Dell, who I mentioned earlier, wrote a book about advocacy. She was a leading force behind getting the hawksbill listed in the Convention on International Trade of Endangered Species that helped end the international trade. She was a real driving force behind that. What it's like to work with fishermen, all these different areas, so that someone new coming into this field that's trying to decide, where they're working or what they're most interested in, where they can learn and what really, attracts them about the work. And so it was really fun to work on and put together. It was a pandemic project. We weren't leading any trips, or things were really slow. So we did that as a way to kind of help build capacity. That's one of the things that we really like to do as an organization. We work with more than 100 partner organizations, and a lot of the folks that we work with are these small community-based groups. They're not like PhD scientists running these programs. They're people that live in their community that want to help the animals that live there. They have pride that their home is habitat for these amazing animals. And so we like to do things like this book. We've also put together trainings and things on, how to write grant proposals, how to do media outreach, things like that, so that the sea turtle community as a whole can build its skills and grow and support these communities. And I think that really leads into, the question that you asked, what is a really important lesson from the field? When I first went to Costa Rica, my background a lot was as an activist. I participated in World Bank protests. I went to a protest camp where they taught us how to lock ourselves to things and how to climb ropes and hang banners. And it was a lot of fun. And I enjoyed that. And I think it's really important and critical work. But I realized after a while that it was not what I wanted to do for my career, but I was still very passionate about saving animals and saving nature. And so I was participating in a lot of actions that were aimed at protecting wild animals and wild populations. What I learned by going and spending, I spent about 2 years total in Costa Rica, going back and forth on multiple occasions and running projects and meeting the people who were eating the turtles and making stuff out of their eggs and becoming really good friends with some of them. Was that the thing that the activist community and especially people in the States here that hear about issues in other countries that we kind of miss the community aspect of the piece. And I learned about, the kind of the fairly dark, pretty colonial history of conservation, where the way that a lot of protected areas, which protected areas came about initially, were for royalty to protect their hunting grounds. And poachers were the local people who were just trying to feed their families and hunt in the places where their families had always hunted. So for that reason, we try not to use that word. It has a very colonial background to it. And so what happened in a lot of these places is researchers from places like the US or Europe went to developing countries, found these incredible wildlife habitats, and convinced the governments to block them off, in a lot of cases, remove the communities that lived there. In many cases, indigenous communities that had lived there for hundreds or thousands of years, that were living, pretty cooperatively with the wild animals, move them out, turn them into parks, turn them into tourist attractions, and cut off a lot of these communities from their sources of income. And the result of that was saving some animals for sure, but it also created a lot of conflict and in a lot of cases set back conservation efforts. When you're making enemies of the people who live around these animals, it's not always the best way to go about protecting the animal. I know of a number of cases where angered communities with reason, were burning down research facilities. That happened at a turtle project in Costa Rica, intentionally killing the animals to affect the conservationists, um, things like that. And so I think the conservation community as a whole and the sea turtle community as part of that has really improved on that in the past couple of decades, and really starting to realize that the community piece is maybe the most essential piece, and trying to work with these communities and trying to come up with ways that conservation can be done that involves them, that gives communities decision-making power, and provides economic alternatives to activities that are no longer allowed. And so that was kind of the main reason that we started Sea Turtles, to work with tourism as a way to bring in alternative sources of income to these communities that could no longer eat turtles or their eggs. And so, yeah, we've generated now more than $1 million for these communities that we've worked with, which is something that we're really proud of. But we think there's a long way to go. And, we really encourage the groups that we work with to try to work as cooperatively as possible with their communities. We try to support as much community work as we can, the groups themselves, the local groups themselves. And so we're a source of funding for these groups that may not be able to find other funding. They may not have some of the connections with some of the big foundations or businesses here in the US. So yeah, we intentionally, Jay and I, when we started Sea Turtles, we did not want to be an organization that went into these countries and said, this is how you should protect your turtles. We really intentionally decided that we wanted to figure out ways that we could bring some support from where the money is, the US and other developed countries, into these communities so that they had the resources that they need to protect their own resources.
Yes, and that's something that the Hawksville Project and Rays of Gratitude together are is that's a very passionate part of what we do, and that's a highlight when we go in. We always try to work with the local organization, and part of our future mission is to work with local government entities to try and see how we can be a positive influence in these places. So we are
Absolutely.
definitely on the same page with that. I appreciate you sharing that.
Well,
To wrap it up, I always ask at the end of an interview, what is the most important issue in the field of conservation that you would like to bring attention to for people who may not be familiar with wildlife conservation?
um, that's a great question. I mean, I I would say that the community aspect is probably the biggest, but since I already spoke about that, I would say after that, it's really all about climate. And we really, really need to get a handle on the fossil fuel emissions and really start to phase them out as quickly as we can. Sea turtles are not generally thought of as, an animal affected much by climate like a polar bear that lives, in the Arctic where things are changing so rapidly. But sea turtles really are impacted by climate in a lot of ways. One of the most striking ways is that sea turtles, like other reptiles, the sex of the hatchling is not yet determined when they're laid as an egg in the nest. And so it's all determined by the temperature within the nest and where they are within that nest. And so there's a pivotal temperature. Believe it's around like 73. I know it's 28 degrees Celsius. Where temperatures above that will produce females, and temperatures below that will produce, more males. And there's only been a couple of studies that have come out uh, where they've really looked at what percentages of hatchlings are being born male or female. There was a study a few years ago from Australia and another one in Florida, and both of those realized that they were producing almost exclusively females. And so, there is a lot of good news, like I mentioned, in the sea turtle world. There's nesting beaches where the recovery has been dramatic and the work has just been absolutely incredible. And there's a lot of reason for hope and optimism. But if we're only producing females, in 10, 20, 30 years, our problems are even bigger than the ones that we face today. And that's not even bringing in things like sea level rise that are washing out turtle nesting beaches. Warming ocean temperatures do result in more coral bleaching. Coral reefs are obviously major habitats for hawksbills in particular, but other turtles and other animals as well. And just even the exploration of and results from, like the BP oil spill that's still affecting the Gulf of Mexico. We really need to, we really need to solve this problem and quickly, not just for sea turtles and polar bears, but for ourselves. I live in Portland, Oregon. We were never really considered a place that was too affected by climate, but we're getting huge fires every year now. We had a week of smoke. We had 118-degree day in Portland, Oregon.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so nowhere is really immune to this. So, I encourage everybody that's listening to get involved. Tell your decision makers, your representatives, the businesses that you support, encourage them all to really take strong steps for the climate. It's really the only thing that's going to solve that issue.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for sharing that and to bringing light to that issue. I'm always very interested to hear each individual's what their highlight is, but it typically is between plastic and climate. So, those are our two major issues that we're battling, but always good
Yes.
to bring awareness to them. But I appreciate you coming today and sharing all of your thoughts. It was an honor to speak to you, and we look forward to seeing what Sea Turtles is going to do in the future and with speaking to you soon.
Thank you so much for having us. It was a real pleasure. And yeah, and good luck with your work as well.
Thank
Like I
you
said,
so much.
Hawksbills need all the help that they can get.
Yes, they can't. They do. And we appreciate that. So thank you so much.
Yeah. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.